So, today we're talking about analyzing how automation technologies can multiply staff effectiveness in evidence management, reduce manual processing time, and create sustainable operations that address growing evidence volumes with limited personnel. This is evidence room operations and staff optimization. Anyway, Ben, how are you today?
Paul, it is a great day. It's good to be with you. The weather is beautiful outside. It's starting to feel a little more like fall out there. It is wonderful.
Yeah, we don't get that here in Southern California. I'm over here in Los Angeles, and so it is 85 and sunny, and we're loving every minute of it. But
I live in Kentucky where we get some seasons around here, so there are transition periods, and it's we're going from hot summer to where every once in a while we get a little taste of fall.
I grew up in Indianapolis, so I know where I know what you're saying. When I would go back to visit my family during, the Indianapolis 500, it'd be like
Hmm.
105. Then I go
Right.
visit during Christmas, and it was 10 below 0. Let me tell you,
Yes,
I don't miss that.
those are called seasons. They're great.
That's what I hear. So, a couple of things I wanna talk about today. So when agencies tell you that they're drowning in evidence, but they can't hire more staff, what is your response to that?
My first thought is that's the same for everybody. I've been saying this for years. We live in a world where the idea that you could go to command staff and just say, I need more people in the evidence room, and they respond with seemingly, hey, you know what? We have some extra money laying around here. We would just like to we were waiting for somebody to come to us and say they needed something, and then you just get what you want. That's the same case for everybody. The idea that you're just going to get more human resources to help deal with growing amounts of evidence is non-existent. So in reality, automation is the answer, because you're just not going to get more people.
No, that's absolutely true. It seems like the staff is the most expensive part of any business.
Right, not just evidence operations and police. It's in the world in general, hiring people is always an expensive proposition. So, we've been for years have been selling automation and technology to help do things. I would even argue this. If you properly implement our software with all the automation tools that we're going to talk about today, you could hire three people and not pull off what we're going to do with some of the automation that's inside of our software. So the comparison to how much it would cost to have even one resource, one human resources with what our software to do would do is just incomparable. And so that's why in the end it's a lot easier to say I need a small piece of that human capital to put toward technology, and then if we can show the results that that'll produce, it's an easier path for sure.
We've had conversations in the past about this, and one of the frustrations that you have shared is you went to an agency and you showed them everything that SAFE can do, and they said, "This is going to cut like 5, 10 people off of my staff, and I don't have a place to put them."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So
that just to be clear, that was one time I heard that statement, and that was a very, very large federal agency. That story doesn't translate down to evidence room with 1, 2, or 3 people where it's like, and I know we're gonna talk about that here a little bit today, where it's like, "Hey, I can cut my evidence room staff in half." I mean, what we're looking to do with automation is enable the people that are there to work at much higher levels of efficiency. The end result is not, well, how do we shed staff? Like that was one case one time with one really big federal agency.
sure, absolutely. But also, if you're able to implement these automation techniques, then the staff is not going to be scrambling to get things done or missing things when they're trying to look for it. So let me ask you a
You
question.
know you
Go
know
ahead.
what? And I guess just to amplify that a little bit, I don't think people that are not well automated, I don't, and I think I'm saying this the right way. They're not scrambling to get things done. Many times they're sort of stuck and they don't know where to go. And so they're sort of just locked into it's so overwhelming. I don't even know where to begin to move.
Mm,
We're trying to get them unstuck. We're trying to get them just beginning to move. And so a lot of our helping an agency begins with let's just start making movement. And here's some simple things that we can do, and then we build up to some higher level things. But that's you know, I don't get a sense that people are just working, 80 hours a week and just hammering away to try to get up. If they were doing that, they'd probably be already looking for automation anyways.
That's true. So, what does staff multiplication really mean in practical terms for an evidence manager?
Well, I think it's a non-existent idea. The fact that you're just we sort of I think your question is, and we sort of just hit on that. The idea of multiplying your staff is non-existent. It isn't going to happen. So if your approach is how do I add more people on to get a job done, that's not going to happen. It's we have got to automate the people that we already have is the answer.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was thinking the question is a little bit about not necessarily like multiplying your staff physically, but multiplying the output.
Well, okay, so in that case, that's exactly what we're aiming for here. We want to take a human person and make them twice as efficient as what they already are. And so, or even greater than that. I mean, we've got clients when they implement our automated disposition tools, they are able to accomplish much more than what they're doing right now without some of these automation tools. So, I mean, in some cases, we're doubling output. In other cases, where people are really crushing it, you may see 3 to 4 times the level of output for one person versus not having some of those things. And you may hear that and be like, there's no way that is possible. I'm telling you right now, I have seen agencies with no more additional human capital pull things off that if I had gone back in time and sat down and said, hey, by the way, 3 years from now, you will be at these levels, they would have said, there's no way we'll pull that off.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's pretty daunting when you have all of these things in front of you and you're thinking of it's going to be this much better. Yeah, I got to see it to believe it.
That's right.
So, which manual processes in evidence management provide the biggest opportunity for automation?
So let me start out with, there's multiple ways to go about answering this. The first one is, and it's sort of a repeat of what I just said. We don't want to just walk in the door and go with what is going to be the biggest bang for your buck. Because the problem is when you're going from little to no automation, you want to go in increments. You want to
Mm.
start building and get processes in place that are foundational and working and allow you to build the larger level outputs. So, one of the first things we might look at, and as hard as this is to believe, there are still agencies out there that are using, I don't think today I've seen pen and paper lately. They may exist out there still, but generally we see a lot of Excel documents or RMS systems. And so, one of the first steps is actually getting officer entry of data, making sure that they're not handwriting out forms. Cause I do see that out there. Like there's some agencies where the officer will handwrite out a piece of paper, turn that over to an evidence technician who is then going to enter that stuff into the software. That's crazy. I mean, the amount of time that it takes to sit and write something out. Um, we can get a tenfold return on my investment on something like that. Where if you get your officers doing the data entry, that's going to go so much faster. We do not want evidence technicians touching, manual entry like that. So that's a really entry level thing that can be accomplished with automation. The biggest bang for the buck is going to be our automated disposition. But that's always the last step. We want to help somebody implement our software, get a lot of other tools that are in place. But when I answer the question, what's the biggest bang for your buck? It's our automated disposition tools, because I would put it this way. People that are using our software that have implemented the auto disposition tools, they are they are going to fight if somebody suggests that they leave our software. They would quit their jobs first. I'm telling you, I know that's true because I've had evidence technicians tell me that the chief will come along and say, hey, we're going to drop this software. The RMS has the plug-in already for evidence tracking. And we've had clients tell their chief, I will quit my job if you take this away from me. So that tells you how much of a premium they place on those tools to accomplish their job. The thought of going back to not having that stuff, They'd rather quit their job instead of doing that. And so that is the biggest bang for their buck, but it takes a while to get to that point. So we're going to help them build up into all of that. That was a long-winded answer for, you know, there's a range of tools we want to implement to help get bang for your buck.
Yeah, you see that a lot. I mean, if you're passionate about your job, you like what you're doing, and then all of a sudden now you've got to take a step backwards. I mean, it
Man.
just makes your job that much more miserable. And you're thinking about how much easier it was when you had these tools. Now, has that ever happened where these tools have been taken away from people?
Oh, absolutely. But I will say, unfortunately, that does happen. If somebody leaves our software product, it is almost always for one reason. I'll bet you it would be north of 95% of the clients we lose are for this reason. Chief comes along and says, "Hey, we're cutting money. Just use the RMS product." And I mean, I understand sort of having that argument, but they're looking at it from one standpoint, budgetary only. So that's why one of the things we tell evidence technicians, you need to be using all of our tools and then reporting this stuff to the police chief so that when they think about coming along, they don't treat the evidence room as just another, entity of the agency that can operate off of the RMS system. They would never go to the crime lab and say, "Hey, we're going to drop your crime lab software. Just use the RMS product." Why do they not do that? The answer is the lab is considered to be a specialized entity. Same thing with ballistics. They consider that a specialized function. But if the evidence room is not acting like a specialized entity, then all of a sudden the chief can be like, "Hey, just use the RMS product. Who cares?" So, that is a argument we try to help our evidence technicians build up to so that when it does come along, they're prepared to fight that answer. But I'm telling you, there is no better way of fighting that than to being able to show quantitative results of what the software is doing for you. If you can't do that, then that's a much harder battle to fight.
Yeah, that sounds like it would be. So, how do you help agencies identify where automation will have the most immediate impact?
So one of the things we're going to do, and this begins in the selling process, we don't just wait till the software is implemented. I mean, a huge part of our selling our software is helping people understand where are they going to get benefit from the product and where can we automate things at. So we will, in the selling process, begin to ask those questions. How are you operating today? Because I don't know I can't help you automate and get better if I don't know where you're at right now. So we ask a lot of questions during the selling phase so that we can properly help them understand this is where you can grow. And so, I've already rattled off some of the different areas where we can begin to help with automation. We try to figure that out as quick as possible so that we can give them a path toward this is what full blown automation looks like.
Yeah, it sounds like from the stories you've said in the past, you've gone into some agencies who were somewhat archaic. I mean, I remember talking to some of the clients, like Kristen was saying that before using Tracker, she was using pen and paper.
Yeah.
So implementing automation, just you see a dramatic change. So
And this
what
is,
would you
I mean, listen, you're throwing out something that private entities like nobody walks into Amazon and tries to pitch them on automate like they are highly efficient. I mean, they're squeezing pennies out of every dollar, and they're doing it at large scale. But the problem is, many times in the evidence room, these are police officers that came, off the, being out in the field and they're in the evidence room. And it's not that they don't care about what they're doing, but maybe they're not technology grounded people. And so a lot of it is helping them understand these are the possibilities and here's where you're at now and here's where you can be. And so, it's a battle and it's certainly worth helping people understand that because when they do implement these tools, it changes their world. And that's what we're looking for. The end result we don't just want people to buy our software. So many people out there, I know this is easy for a company that sells something to say, but what we care about is if you go to our website, our new website, the client testimonials on there. Just go to trackerproducts.com and check out the success stories. There are people, clients of ours that are actually talking about how our software worlds per se. And that's what we want. I want more and more people that are like, man, this thing changed how we do what we do. And we're so happy with it.
I got to tell you, I've had multiple conversations with tracker clients, and they're evangelists. Sometimes when I'm having these conversations
Right.
and I hear some of the things they say, I'm like, did Ben pay you to have these conversations? But no, they're sincere and they mean it. Like, I don't want to say life changing, but as far as your job goes, I mean, it's a dramatic improvement from the way that it was.
But Paul, understand they didn't get there on day one. And that's what I want to help people understand, that there is a path toward that. If you, David Bragg at Bowling Green was somebody that you talked to. When I met him, and it was almost 10 years ago at this point, he came out of a world, he was actually running a supermarket. I don't know if he told you that or not, but like his background was boxes on shelves and organization and squeezing, of space available and being efficient. And so when we sat down with him, he was looking at one point, I have to inventory 300,000 pieces of evidence, you know, and it was like, it was a massive lift to do all the things that you, and I remember telling him, David, it's going to take you 5 years to get to where you want to be. Now, the good news is when I told David that, he didn't just crawl under the desk and think, oh my goodness, how in the world am I ever going to get to that? We sat down and talked about here's step one, here's step two, and you start hacking away at it. Now, when you talk to him, he's on the other side of that. He can sit there and he can extol how great this is because he has gone through the process. And so, yes, I love it. That is one of my favorite things when you get a client that is willing to get on a camera and sit there and talk about what this product has done for them. And it's not, you can tell they light up talking about it. It's not like, yeah, we bought software, hey, it works. Yeah, it's like they're legitimately passionate. And we've got
Oh yeah.
hundreds of those people that are that way.
So you mentioned that it would take 5 years. I mean, that's not a common situation that it takes 5 years for something like that.
I mean, first of all, Bowling Green is a larger agency. They've got a lot of evidence. But what I would say is, and this is just a reality, running an evidence operation at peak capacity, it, especially if you're going from not doing it very well, and that's all right. There's a lot of people out there. It takes time. I don't want to lead people into this just by
Mm,
like the idea of it, just buy this software and it's going to do everything that you could have ever wanted to do. I don't buy software and the next day it's doing that. It takes time to build this stuff up and get
mm.
routine and get agency buy-in in place. So in reality, it may be years down the road to where you're like, I'm now seeing the full benefit of everything that this can do, but we're a partner in helping you get there all along the way.
That's true. So, what is the most dramatic time savings you've seen from automating evidence workflows?
I mean, again, I got to go back to automated disposition there because I'm looking at that's the one area where you could have an agency that's doing little to no disposition. Davenport, Iowa would be a perfect example of that. We show off their statistics when I do my cop tech presentation every year, and I show this chart where they're growing at a 15% rate every year, and all of a sudden, in a 2 year period of time, they went full tilt on automated disposition. And now all of a sudden, instead of a growth rate, they are actually on pace over a 10-year period of time. They're going to reduce their entire evidence room by 41%. And they've got 200,000 pieces of evidence. So, in order to do that, you have to get rid of 75,000 pieces of evidence and stay on top of the new stuff that's coming in. I mean, it is extraordinary. Now, that's one example, but that is a beacon of hope for a lot of people out there to say it can be done. And by the way, they've got two people operating evidence. That's it. They don't have a team of 20 people. They've got two people in evidence, and they did just get some supplemental people that came in and were helping out with some things, a couple of people. But man, they fully adopted what our system could do. And now I don't know what the exact, I mean, I don't know that I would be able to say this is exactly the percentage of efficiency, but man, when you go from increasing, your evidence to where we're on a trajectory to show a 41% decline in our evidence room with two people and hundreds of thousands of people of evidence, that's extraordinary.
That's very impressive. How do you address concerns from evidence staff who worry that automation might eliminate their job?
I've been doing this for 20 years now. Not one time have I known that an agency eliminated staff because they implemented our software. That is not the end goal. Now, you brought up that one case where that agency, to go back to that federal agency, and I so badly want to say their name, but I'm not going to say it. But they were so poorly positioned that they could have 200 people running their entire evidence operation across the country. I don't know if I ever told you that. It was 200 people that were dedicated to running evidence. They were so inefficient, they could sit there and imagine getting rid of half of those people. That is not your normal case. And so, in the end, after 20 years, again, I'll go back to what I said. I don't know of one agency that implemented our software and now they reduce staff. Our goal is not to reduce staff, it is to get the staff that you have running at peak levels.
Yeah, and sounds like there's a lot of agencies who don't even know what that looks like to
Right.
have their staff running at peak levels.
That's right.
What tasks should evidence managers focus their human attention on versus what should be automated?
Yeah. So here's the thing. When we walk in the door and we start talking to them about inefficiencies in a police department or in the evidence room, okay? Like I mentioned earlier, the intake of evidence. We tell, like in order to get to this peak level of performance, you got to look at every minute of every day and what you're spending your time doing. We want to make sure that evidence techs are spending at least 75% of every week working on disposition tasking and inventories or auditing. Okay. Now, you go to most evidence rooms that aren't doing any level of automation, they are spending the bulk of their week doing intake of evidence, doing communication with people about checking evidence in and out, moving things around, dropping it off at the lab. If you are spending 75 or more percent of your time doing those functions, you are extremely inefficient. In fact, I would even argue if you are doing that, likely you're doing no disposition or doing minimal levels of disposition. You're probably not doing much inventory at all. And I've said this before, a baseline for most department auditing is that your guns, drugs, and monies are audited completely every year.
Dang.
Very few agencies, I'm talking like 5% of agencies can actually state, "We audit completely our guns, drugs, and money every year." These are the most valuable things in a police department's possession, and they're not being I have talked to departments that in 10 years, they have not completely audited their guns, drugs, and money. Can you believe that, Paul? I mean, seriously, you've got money, cash, firearms, dope, whatever, sitting in your evidence room, and in 10 years, it's not been inventoried. That is a department that is screaming lack of inefficiency. So those are some of the things we want to make sure you're spending your time on the right things, those things that you need to not be doing for sure.
I had a conversation with Lieutenant Adam Pape from Forest Park Police Department, and he told me that they had not ever done an audit until they got Tracker, and then now they're consistently doing 3 a year.
I shared, another since we're talking about that, because I think, one of the things I routinely say, if you are running an evidence room, one of the most baseline requirements of your job should be knowing what's in the evidence room and that you have accounted for it being there. If you are not doing that, and I can say this about Adam, he would probably even agree. At one point in time, he was, I think I can say, derelict in his duties. He didn't know how to get to a point where all of that stuff was possible. Maybe his product that he was using didn't even do inventories like that. So, we want to make sure departments are absolutely doing that. And so if you do not have time to do that or you do not have software to do that, that is a gotta fix right now. And I was going to mention Des Moines because this is one of my favorite stories that I shared. Des Moines, Iowa, Krista at Des Moines. They have a policy. And first of all, I think they've got 40,000 pieces of evidence in their evidence room. It's a good size operation. And they inventory every piece of evidence once a year. They inventory guns, drugs, and money twice a year. I mean, I'm talking, those are insane levels of accountability. I'll bet you I couldn't find five of our clients that are doing inventories at that level. And so I was actually doing a presentation one time where I wanted to show off if that was actually, I said this out loud. I talked out loud about Des Moines and this is what they were doing. So I went into their software. I did a search on drug items that were older than 5 years. Now, if my statement is true, and I did a search on a 5-year-old drug item, it should have shown up in 10 inventories. And so I brought up a random drug item that was older than 5 years and went to the inventory tab to see how many times has it shown up. It showed up 10 times. Like it was
Wow.
Now, I was running a real risk at that point because I could have
Yeah.
shown that off and that could have, I didn't even look at it ahead of time. That could have backfired. I would have been scrambling to like try to find a way around that. But man, I was so proud of them. And I wish their chief at Des Moines could hear me talk about that. He would have been proud also because Des Moines is in the upper echelon when it comes to strategically using our software at its highest levels. And they don't have 20 people running their evidence room. They are peak efficiency levels of operation, and that allows them to inventory their drugs twice a year. Good for them, and anybody can get there.
What is it you think that they're doing differently than other people are, other than just using the software to its full capacity?
I wish I had a better answer for you than repeating what you just said right there. The
Okay.
reality is, if you talk to Krista on the phone and you asked her, how did you get there? Her answer would be, we are utilizing this software to its highest capacity. That's the answer. I mean, that's my whole argument. You cannot, I would say this, if I took away the software from Krista, you would watch all that go down the crapper. If oh boy, heaven forbid, they had to go back to their RMS system. I think I need to have you call Krista and ask her the question out loud. Hey, Krista, imagine one day your chief walks in and says, hey, we're going to the RMS. Just watch her face and watch her response. She probably is going to go look for a shank in the evidence room and it'd be like, I'll take this right to somebody's heart if they, she probably would say that. But that's the answer to that. She is running our software at peak levels. And that is, I mean, she knows what she's doing and she is an assassin at using our software to automate everything that they do.
Hmm. That's fascinating. That's definitely a great success story. So, how does automation change the skill set requirements for evidence management staff?
That's a really interesting question. And in reality, there are some people that operate evidence rooms that are less technically proficient. And so when you talk about implementing software and getting to high levels of efficiency, it starts out with a level of confidence and a determination that we're going to make this work. I don't think you have to be, today's latest and greatest technology expert to pull this off, although there have been several times I've seen people in evidence rooms that will say, listen, I don't like computers. Now this has been a while. This is way less today. But they're like, I don't like computers. I really don't even want to be doing this. That's a hard row to hoe there if you've got somebody that is saying or doing that. But I would say it is going to amplify the need to be a little more technology proficient and to be open to change. I would say it's probably 80% willingness to change and 20% the capacity to actually pull that off.
Yeah, that's true. You've said it before. If you've got people who just refuse to change and they don't want to be a part of this process when, like you said, it's going to take a couple of years to do this,
Yeah.
then maybe that's not the right person for that position.
But it starts with ambition. You give me somebody with ambition and we'll pull it off. I'm not as worried about hey, I'm not as good with technology. If you're ambitious, we'll help you get there.
Very nice. So then what is your approach to implementing automation without disrupting daily operations?
Well, that's always important because again, we can't just And this is true of any software. You can't just come in and shut down operations in order to implement whatever the thing is. That's why it's generally, a multi-year approach to going from phase 1 to phase 2 to 3 to 4, because we don't have the luxury of shutting down operations for 3 months. It's not like there are some stores out there, they just shut down for a while they remodel. You don't shut down evidence operations for 3 months in order to retool and all of these things. So you got to work within the confines of what you got. The operation has to continue. So you're trying to work with them a little bit at a time to make things better. And that's the only way you can go about doing that.
Almost like when you see people working on the interstate or the freeway, you've gotta reroute the traffic so that you can
Right.
get that done, but you're not stopping it.
But that's funny you say that, Paul. Many times when I'm driving down the road and it's just bumper to bumper for months on end, I often think, wouldn't it be better just to shut it down for like a week and just like rip the band-aid off? And the answer is probably no, because you just can't do that. But I don't know, man. Sometimes I'm like, it'd be a lot better just to shut this down for a couple of weeks and just get it done and get back up to peak flow, because the months of gridlock is painful also. But we don't have that choice in evidence. You can't just shut down operations.
Definitely not. So how do you measure the effectiveness of automation in evidence management?
It always comes down to statistics and reporting. So let's go back to Krista at Des Moines for a moment. Not only is she an assassin at using our software, she's an assassin at reporting. You can walk in and ask her any question about anything, and she knows the answer pronto. She has a dashboard. I often show off the dashboard that she built within our software. So she is unbelievable at data and statistics and knowing what is going on and where is it at, and she reports back to her leadership, this is what's going on. And so I'm telling you, to her leadership, I can't imagine they would ever go to Krista and say, hey, we're going to get rid of your evidence software, or we're going to take resources away. They know she's running at peak capacity because she makes sure to tell them what is going on.
Also, even if you're in leadership, if you're the chief and you've had probably any conversation at all with Krista about her situation there, then you know how good she is and you know how well she knows it. By taking it away, you're doing the entire agency a
That's
disservice at
right.
that
Yeah.
case.
It's sad, but if you go back to what I said a little bit ago, here's the reality. If your chief doesn't see the value and they do come along, then you've probably not done a very good job of showing them where the value is. And I've even said this before. If you're not using our automation tools, like, and maybe not right off the bat, every one of them, but if you're not using any automation tools, you don't need our software. Just use whatever. Use the Excel document. You're not doing any automation anyways. Why pay extra for a product if you're not taking advantage of the best features that it offers? But I've shared this statistic with you before. A small percentage of all of our clients are using our auto dispo feature of the product. It's confounding that the best tool that we offer, so many people do not implement. But the ones that do, man, I'm telling you what, they're and it's no more money to turn it on and use it, but it does take training and understanding and agency buy-in to get up to the level of using that.
So you may have just answered my next question by what you just said, but is that the main reason why people, if it's so beneficial and it helps on so many different levels, why aren't people using it? Is it the ramp up process?
You know what? Listen, that's a hard question to answer. I think it really boils down to the people that get it and want it, they do it. The people that don't get it and maybe don't want it, because like I told you, I think one of the problems in policing and law enforcement, or government in general, people aren't generally incentivized to produce better results. In Amazon, you are absolutely, there are metrics and there's all sorts of probably carrots in place that if you squeeze another penny out of it, you're going to see some benefit out of that. In an evidence room, nobody's going in and saying, listen, if you maintain these levels of efficiency, we'll give you a bonus at the end of the year or something like that. But that stuff doesn't exist in that world. And I think, that's something that I would love to see happen, but I don't know. I mean, Usually in police and law enforcement, you're lucky if there are routine, reviews that are done where just some feedback is given. It's a totally different environment in public entities. It's very different than in private entities where they're driving production.
Ah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. What automation features do agencies request most often versus what actually provides the most value?
You know what's interesting? Most people come in the door and they don't know what they don't know. They probably know, listen, things are broken, things aren't going well. They can certainly answer the question, am I doing inventories on my guns, drugs, and money every year? They know they're not getting that. But as bad as that is, Paul, and I'm telling you, it's a small percentage of clients that are actually maintaining those levels. In the end, it's because nobody's holding them accountable to that. And so they just don't know what they don't know when they come in the door. So a lot of it is us helping them understand these are the possibilities. And for some people, when you show them what those possibilities are, they take it and run with it.
That makes sense. Okay. So then how does evidence disposition automation change the relationship between officers and say evidence staff?
Well, and that's a really great question. In fact, I would say this prior to evidence automation or evidence disposition automation, many times the police officer will bring in whatever the evidence is, dump it in the evidence room, and that's the end of it. They don't ever hear about it again because very little disposition is taking place, or somebody else is responsible for that disposition. So they largely don't care how much they bring in. And so I sort of one of the things I tell people when they're looking at our automated disposition tools, that one of the byproducts, and it's a small one, but it is a byproduct, that when all of a sudden the officer is now responsible for answering what to do with the evidence down the road, they're all of a sudden a little more judicious about how much evidence they bring in. Because, before they never cared about it. Nobody ever asked them about it again. And so it's just like accountability. If nobody ever asks you the question, hey, how much disposition are you doing? Or how much inventorying are you doing? If nobody's asking it, nobody's telling and nobody cares. So it's when all of a sudden the chief comes in and he's like, man, I really care about inventories. I'm going to ask you every 6 months, where are we at with this? Do you think that's going to become a priority? Yes. So it's the same thing, the relationship between the officer and the evidence technician when you bring them into the disposition process, which is simply, I'm going to come back to you in a year or 2 years or 5 years, and I'm going to ask you about this evidence. All of a sudden, they become a mutual player in the process versus I just dump it on the evidence room and I don't worry about it.
Okay, that makes sense. So then what role does quality control play when you're automating the evidence process?
I mean, quality control. And when I answer quality control, I'm going to say like reporting and looking at the data. You've got to be able to do that. You absolutely have to understand this is where I'm at, this is where I'm making progress at. And those tools exist in our software. You just got to be able to look at that. You got to go into the system and be able to look at the analytics that are there. Like I mentioned a little while ago at Des Moines, every once in a while, bring up a piece of evidence that's 5 years old. And you know what? Go show the chief and say, hey, I just want to show you in the last 5 years that we've had this drug, it has been inventoried 10 times. And now all of a sudden they'll be a little more aware of what is going on. So quality control actually matters. And part of that, buying our software, we want to get you to a point where you understand these are the measurables to begin to look at.
But you're also saying that it's a good idea to share the information, share these successes with the powers that be so they can see that there's an actual benefit. So when it comes time to cutting things, you're not the first on the chopping block.
So one of the biggest changes we've made over the last couple of years in selling our software is instead of just selling to the evidence technicians, we're now actually going after the leadership to say, hey, listen, you need to look at your evidence operations. I cannot tell you how many people in leadership know little to nothing about their evidence room. In some cases, it's astonishing how little an evidence technician knows about evidence control. I see that played out time and again. It's no shock that leadership knows little or nothing. So when I stand in a room full of police chiefs and lieutenants and higher level people, I want to make sure I usually ask them 5 questions about their evidence. Very rarely do any of them know the answers to that. And I'm like, that's a huge problem if you don't know these basic 5 questions about your evidence. So by using our software, we have reporting that you should be able to go back to your evidence technician on a routine basis and say, I want to know what's going on with this.
Okay, so you kind of cliffhanger us a little bit. You're gonna share those 5 questions?
Well, yes. I mean, I don't know all 5 of them right off the top of my head, but I would say one
Okay.
of them, I'll answer one of them is, do you know how much evidence is coming in and out of your evidence room every year? Just a basic number.
Mm,
Do you know how much cash is sitting in your evidence room? Is that important? Do you know how many guns, drugs, and monies have been inventoried in the last year? So those are 3 of the 5 questions, and these are softball questions. I mean, these
mhm.
are these are things that somebody should absolutely know, and rarely do they have any idea.
That's interesting. So, how do you help agencies transition from manual processing without losing the institutional knowledge?
Yeah. So, we've sort of beat all over this already, but the summary of that would be is you got to help them understand what is possible. Okay. You're here. You may not know what all is possible. Let's point out to where we want to go, and then we make incremental steps to getting to that. And there's no quicker way to implement these things, but if you get the right person and they understand what the possibilities are, especially in the comparison to where they're at right now,
Mhm.
you can see the light bulb go off sometimes where it's like, man, now I see how I can get there. And when they start to work toward it, it's a whole different level at that point.
Yeah, it starts to change everything. So, I have a question for you. What is the difference between digitizing processes and then truly automating them?
So to me, digitizing this, I mean, this is probably your routine RMS system. My officers are not handwriting paper anymore. They're entering the data in the RMS system. That's digitizing. And listen, that rarely do I see anymore officers handwriting out paperwork. All right. So they have definitely digitized that process and made it more efficient for the officer. But automation goes way beyond that. That's the inventory control, the auto disposition, some of the workflow stuff that we have in our software. Just even simple things like triggering an alarm when somebody enters over $1,000 into evidence, something like that. So there's a huge difference between I'm just simply using a computer system, because you could argue I'm using Excel. That's digitizing things. Yes, Excel is better than pen and paper, but that's a long way away from the automated tools that really help get things running at peak capacity.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You were saying like barcode scanner is a perfect example of digitizing it compared to writing it down on forms. But then the automation process takes it to a completely different level and really holds people accountable.
I mean, there's no comparison between them. And one thing, just to continue to beat on the RMS systems, and I beat on all of them equally, because I've never run into an RMS vendor that would claim that they can do all the things that we do. We're a very specialized product for evidence. They are a general product for the entire police department. So, in the end, they're not going to try to sit down and argue, hey, our evidence module is as good as what they do. We spend every day, all day long, focused on evidence. They spend, whatever the required 4 hours a year that, they have to spend on their evidence module. And so there is no comparison. They wouldn't argue that. So that's where a lot of times we work on integrations with those RMS products so that the department can have the benefit of their RMS system with evidence in it, but they're getting all the power of what our product does.
Yeah, you've mentioned in the past, I actually talked to some other people on the team about there's some agencies will use, I guess, some RMSs come with a free or it's included evidence management. So it's almost like an afterthought where everything that you're doing is fully dedicated to evidence management.
I mean, I don't believe I've ever run into an RMS product that did not have an evidence module inside of it. But it almost always meets the basic definition of digitizing. In fact, there's a lot of RMS systems that have barcoding. This is a long known thing. They can generate a label with the barcode, but they don't have anything to use anything with those barcodes. So it's like somebody one time decided, hey, we need barcoding on this evidence. We're going to print it on the label, but they never built the system in order to scan the barcode to where it can use it. Like, I mean, but that's the kind of stuff I see in that world. Now, that's not all of them. I mean, there's a lot of them that have barcoding and you can scan the barcode. But from my standpoint, when I talk about automation and efficiencies, I don't even bring barcoding up. Like that should be every evidence system should do basic levels of barcoding. Now, maybe automation and higher levels of automation in our product would be using our container feature that most RMS products are not going to have, where you can take so like Las Vegas, for example. Las Vegas just moved from one evidence room to another. Well, when Las Vegas moves evidence, they're moving hundreds of thousands of pieces of evidence. They don't want to scan during the 2 weeks they're moving all this evidence, every barcode on every piece of evidence. So what they did was they took large quantities of items, scanned them, put them into containers, sealed them, and when it came time to moving, they moved the container, scanned the barcode. It automatically accounted for everything inside that container. And now the actual process of moving the box from one room to another wasn't scanning every piece of evidence inside that container. It was bulk moving the container. And that right there, that's a huge difference if you have to move an evidence room in scanning every piece of evidence versus I can spend time prepping for the move by containerizing all of this.
It sounds like there's a lot of different ways to be efficient during this entire process, whether it's moving the entire system or just the individual tracking the individual pieces.
I mean, I probably couldn't give you all the ways. I mean, if we sat down and did a 3 hour demo of our product and then you compared it to your general RMS system or even some evidence management systems that are just 30 years old, I would argue if you're using a 30-year-old product, and there are plenty of those out there, there is zero chance it has been updated to do some of the latest automation that we can do with cloud available systems. And we talked about that when we talked about AI. I mean, there's no way of integrating those desktop products into AI. And so if you've got a 30-year-old product, you may actually be benefited by going to Excel, because then you could at least, build formulas inside of Excel to help deal with the quantity of evidence. But that's a different
That's
story.
funny. You don't hear that all the time, but yeah, that's true. That's a step up because at least Excel is getting updated
That's
every,
correct.
every
Right.
month or two.
That's it, right, and your 30-year-old app is not. So, I don't know that I would make that argument for everybody, but if you're in a position where going to Excel from your existing system is a step up, then you've got a really poor existing system.
Yep, absolutely. So, only a couple more questions here, real quick. But how does automation impact audit preparation and compliance monitoring?
Yeah, oh my goodness. So, I mean, this is sort of the golden carrot of the whole thing, because auditing does come, all right? Now, a lot of departments are not very consistent about it, but there is nothing more trying to an evidence technician's brain than finding out, hey, in 2 months we're going to do an audit of your evidence room and you're not at all prepared. And here's my simple way of putting it. Do you think Krista at Des Moines, who is doing the inventories, do you think she sweats when somebody says something about an audit? As a matter of fact, I guarantee you they could just walk into her evidence room on any given afternoon and say, surprise, we are here to audit. Most times they're at least given a heads up that, hey, this is coming at some point in time. Like maybe you're doing a CALIA audit. Hey, they're coming in next month. And so it's coming, but you should not need months to prepare for that, when in reality what you need months more is just mentally prepare yourself for this is coming and I'm going to have to deal with whatever the fallout is of it. You want to be like Krista, where it's like, hey, you come on in any day, I don't care, you show up anytime you want. And she is absolutely aware that if they ask for a drug item that's 5 years old and they pull it off the shelf like I did, it, like, there is no way they're gonna look at that and be like, "Wow, you could probably do a little more around here." That's just not the case.
Wow. Well, I mean, I've had conversations with some agencies myself when they would say that the chief came in and said, "I'm so sorry to do this." They were apologetic, but I have to do this surprise audit. And you're like,
Right.
no problem. It's going to take a couple of hours. It will be done in 2 hours and you'll have the
Yep.
entire thing audited. So That's
You
great.
should want that in your evidence room, and I'm telling you, very few evidence technicians want and ask for an audit because, they're more worried about the results, but, you know, Krista's not worried about it, and many of our clients are not worried about a spot on.
Wow, that's great. Well, this has been fantastic. It's been a good conversation to learn all about automation and the benefits. And if somebody wanted to reach out, where could they find you?
Well, they can do multiple things. Certainly going to our website, trackerproducts.com, which is a brand new website at this point. I'm very, very happy about that. Um, our emails are on the website for everybody. If you go to the About Us section and go down to the people working at Tracker, you can find any of our emails. Our phone numbers are on the website. You can reach out to us on LinkedIn, send us a text message. I don't care. It's whatever you got to do to reach out. We are here to help out.
That sounds great. Well, thanks for taking the time, Ben, and we'll talk to you next week.
Always good talking, Paul. Have a great day.
Okay, bye bye.
Bye.